I'm Savannah McDonald. For my cultural interview, I decided to talk to my brother-in-law. His name is Tuli Maya. So their parents were from Samoa, so they're Samoan. Their parents were first generation in America, so this means the kids are second, right? Like my husband and Tuli. They moved to Hawaii before they were born. So the native language is Samoan. And when I talk to Tuli, he can't speak it fluently, but he's conversational and he can understand when people speak it to him. So we talked about like, would he teach his children the language? And he said probably not. It is important to them to keep the culture alive. However, it's not a very common or useful language, and their mother is actually Mexican, so they learned Spanish already. I asked him how important education is in the Samoan culture. Tuli said that it's becoming a lot more important. Most parents are first generation to the United States, so they didn't have an education or finished high school and that's it. My husband and Tuli's parents, I don't think they even finished high school, if I can remember correctly. So they've always pushed their kids, right? So you've seen like the graduations when you finish high school, that's a big milestone when they're like laid up and they have the haku crowns and everything. And then for the role of men in their culture, the men are usually the ones who work. They're expected to provide for the family, stuff like that. And then women, like most patriarchal societies, they were expected to be caregivers, take care of the home. One thing here is that the men usually cooked the food, like the feasts, they cooked pig, which was different, right? Because women usually cook, and then the women are the ones who serve the food. So how is physical contact viewed in your culture? And I can speak to this too. There's no such thing as personal space. People are always greeted with a hug, a kiss on the cheek. It's very familial. You'll see everyone referring to each other as like cousin and everything like that. They're very friendly with one another. So I asked him about disrespectful and respectful customs in their culture. And there's quite a few, but he said, basically, you have to excuse yourself when you walk past elders. So you have to bow while you're walking and say too low, which is like, excuse me. And that's considered respectful. You should not eat before the elders. So the elders always get served first, and usually we serve their food. The top of the head is considered sacred, so nothing should ever be passed over, which is kind of a more traditional one. And then it's also considered rude to like point with the feet, so you should like tuck your feet in or stuff like that. And then like another one is you should always talk to someone at like eye level or lower. So if you're standing and someone else is sitting, you're expected to sit and talk to them, especially if it's an elder, you need to be lower or it's considered disrespectful. So how is family set up in your culture? Is there a hierarchy of status and stuff like that? So there's definitely a hierarchy of age, like we've kind of gathered. Elders are highly respected. You serve the elders. And then there's what's called a matai over the whole family. They're like the high chiefs of the family, and it's kind of like I'm familiar with Hispanic culture, so there's usually like someone that's over the whole family. Like my grandfather was over all of us, like the children, the grandchildren. The matai is kind of like that, except for he's like extended family, everything. So he makes all the big decisions for the whole family, the whole extended family, which is a lot. something interesting with that is there's even like rank of matais. So kind of interesting if my husband's uncle or Tuli's uncle, that is the matai of their family, the Maya family. So he can be in a group with other matais and he can say he is matai Maya, whatever else his title says, and he can pull rank over other family names, if that makes sense. So kind of interesting. It's kind of like traditionally it'd be kind of like villages, and each village and family has a hierarchy. And then some of the important values in Samoan culture. So Fa'a Samoa, like we see on the screen with the little map of Samoa, is meaning like the Samoan way. So that's highly valued, basically like keeping the culture alive, what they do. Some others are family. So extended family is extremely close. Tuli calls one of his cousin's brother, which took me a second to get used to. So they kind of switch names, like third cousins or whatever, they're just cousins and stuff like that. So everyone's just kind of really close. It's normal for extended family to be close. Samoans are also value modesty. So even in Samoa, you're expected to cover up like to your knees and your shoulders and stuff, kind of like LDS culture. And then they're also like a collectivist culture. So your actions reflect back on your family, things like that. And you kind of all take responsibility for things as a family. And then some of the traditions, celebrations, or rituals that their family participates in. So there's a couple big like birthdays. So the first baby's birthday is always huge. Tuli has a baby actually that's 2 years old, and her first birthday was a huge party. And her second birthday was like, I don't think we really celebrated it, but so that the first birthday, and then when people turn 21, they actually, I thought this was interesting. I didn't know this. They get a key made for them if they're still a virgin. So it's kind of like a congrats, key. And then at weddings, there's performances and dances. You guys might have seen the pictures. They are like covered in oil. The bride usually is. And the groom dances around her. And people come up and like stick money to you. So that one's fun. And at weddings, there's also a kind of custom to have a ton of cakes with a ton of tiers. So each tier on the cakes added together represents the ages of the bride and husband. Sometimes how long they've been together. If you want to shorten it down, traditionally it's their ages. So a lot of cake. So is religion important in your culture? So Christianity came to Samoa, and Tuli says that Samoans adopted it pretty fast. So most Samoans identify as some sort of Christian. There's a lot in Utah that are LDS, as we've seen, like Samoan wards, Tongan wards. And then the Samoan values in general, like the modesty, things like that, respectfulness, they kind of line up with LDS culture. So it's pretty, once they adopted the religion, it kind of became their culture. So most popular forms of entertainment in their country. Some of the dances include hakas, talingas, and sasas. So those are all traditional dances. Like hakas, the men's, the talingas, the one that the girls do. And I actually have pictures. Okay, so there's some pictures. And these are the outfits, basically, the traditional dancing headwear. There's like a thick wrap around your body that's kind of like the dress. It's like canvas. So things like that for celebrations. They also always have feasts. So Polynesian parties are always big parties. There's always a ton of food and things like that. So up next, I asked Thule what kind of foods are traditional to eat. And he gave me a couple examples. So ones that I knew of included rice, pork, things like that. And then corned beef and taro. And taro is kind of like a different version of a potato. And then some of the traditional dishes include palusami. So that is this one up here in the top left. It is coconut milk baked inside a taro leaf. So interesting. Pani popo, which is this bread here on the right. So they're bread rolls, they're covered in coconut milk, so they're like soggy bread. And then sapa sui, which is a Samoan version of like Chinese chop suey with the noodles, meat, vegetables, and soy sauce. And sapa sui is great. But there's definitely some dishes that are choice, very yes or no. And then I asked Thule about commonly held misconceptions about people of his culture. He said the biggest one is probably Samoans being mistaken for like Tongan or Fijians, or people not even knowing that Samoan's a thing or that it's a part Polynesian, if that makes sense. So things like that, because it's one of the smallest populations, minority populations in the US. So that makes sense, right? And then there's also misconceptions about how they're all athletic. So usually in America, when you have sons, you put them in football and you expect them to be NFL players or get like a college scholarship just through that. So it's not like academic scholarships aren't pushed as much usually. So it's kind of assumed that you just play football. And then health-wise, Polynesians are thought of as, and it's not really a misconception, but they are just kind of thought of as like bigger people. And they're Polynesians, they're the most obese minority population in the US. I think they're quite a bit up there. So they have some health concerns, but they can also be just built big and not unhealthy. So they just deserve a whole different BMI scale, honestly. And then I asked him if he's ever been treated poorly because of his race, ethnicity, or beliefs. He stated that